time to turn the page.
Now is when the real work begins.
The Electoral College has spoken.
His election is historic.
There is nothing that we cannot achieve.
This is a referendum for us to start working together.
Hello, welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Michael Duffy, Opinions Editor-at-Large at the Post, and I'm very pleased to be kicking off our new government series today with two terrific guests who've been there before. Later in the program, we'll hear from former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, but first, Penny Pritzker, Secretary of Commerce under Barack Obama, and an advisor to the Biden transition campaign, Biden transition, joins us this morning. Thank you for being here, Secretary Pritzker.
Mike, I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, and we can start with what we all have learned overnight and this morning, the results from Georgia, though they're not complete. Tell me what you think of them and what it means for President-elect Biden.
Well, first of all, what we've learned is that we still have a country that is very divided, and this race was really close. But assuming that both Democrats win in Georgia, obviously one race has been called and the other is still in the balance, but is looking good. It means that, the Democrats could take control of the Senate, which would really help with the Biden agenda. The Biden agenda being very focused on fundamentals, which is how do we deal with the virus and getting the virus under control? How do we get relief for working families and small businesses? And ultimately, we've got to build back our economy better and more in a more inclusive way. The other thing it means, on a more logistical standpoint is that if the Democrats are in control of the Senate, it will determine kind of the agenda of the Senate, where the Senate focuses, what are the committee hearings about. It'll also affect probably budgets, judges. It'll probably make it easier for the nominees that the president-elect and vice president-elect have proffered to get through that process, because Chuck Schumer will control the floor, if you will. But fundamentally, we have to keep in mind that the American people need the Senate to rise to the challenges that we're facing as a country. So those challenges have not gone away. They're right in front of us, and the American people are demanding attention.
You were a relatively early supporter of Joe Biden, and you worked on the transition, particularly on economic policy and liaison with business groups. I'm wondering, could you give us a little more granular sense of Build Back Better means? What specifically would change if we built back better?
Well, the Build Back Better plan is really a fundamental focus, first of all, on we have to address the virus because our economy, getting parts of our economy going again depends upon us getting the virus under control, which obviously means we need to get folks vaccinated, and that's a high priority. The second part of it is really investing in people and in small businesses to make sure that that's where a huge portion of the job loss, the continued job loss is, to make sure that we can bring those good jobs back. And then it's about fundamentally investing in things like infrastructure. An enormous opportunity, I think, for Congress to address our infrastructure spend, both our physical infrastructure as well as our digital infrastructure, to keep America competitive, as well as it will be good for job creation in the country. And I think that's a bipartisan opportunity for Congress. The Build Back Better plan also focuses on investing in people, making sure that we're really giving an opportunity for our workforce to have the skills that they need to be able to compete in the 21st century. And then there's a focus on two things: investing in R&D so that the United States is globally competitive and remains a leadership economy, which is extremely important. And second is investing in clean energy. Obviously, we need an infrastructure that is climate friendly, but also we need to lead in clean energy technologies. And so the Build Back Better plan finally also addresses racial inequality and inequality of opportunity. And that's an extremely important thing. As we've seen, we just do not have equal access and equal opportunity for everyone in this country to good jobs and education and healthcare, and we need to address that.
You're right. The pandemic has revealed a split in the economy that many people didn't see before, though it had been there a long time. The stock market rebounded, which made the rich richer, and yet we had people standing in food lines that seemed to just keep growing. What will Biden do to change that imbalance?
Well, I think you'll see, particularly if the outcome is as we're hoping in terms of Georgia, that you'll probably see further stimulus. There needs to be, and there's been a lot of conversation, further stimulus, particularly geared towards the worker and geared towards small businesses. And also, I think you'll see infrastructure spending occur, which is extremely important. Look, we have to, ADP came out today and said there were 123,000 jobs lost in December. That's the first time we've actually had more job loss since April. That's really a bad sign, which means we have a lot of work to do. And then obviously, COVID is just continuing to ravage our communities and our country. We had 3,700 deaths yesterday. It's tragic. And that is something that Joe Biden is absolutely focused on, making sure that we as a country take the steps that we need to, whether it's wearing masks, taking the individual precautions that we need to take, but also making sure that we get the virus under control so that we can get the economy back rolling.
Can you talk a little bit, before we go into the relationship with Congress, can you talk a little bit more about how you assess, and I know your brother is the governor of Illinois, how you assess the rollout of the vaccination program at this point? Is it going well? Are we behind? What do you make of the progress, and from where you sit?
Well, from where I sit, first of all, thank God for science. And we should all respect our scientists. They have done a miraculous job of producing vaccines that are very efficacious. And so now the question is, how do we get those vaccines out? And not just my brother, I've heard from a number of governors around the country how frustrated they are that they get promised, let's say, 10,000 vaccines and 5,000, and they organize to make sure there are people there to, get vaccinated, and then they receive 5,000 vaccines. That can't be. This needs to be where it's seamless, where the information is transparent, where it's reliable. And I believe that the team that Joe Biden has put together, led by Jeff Zients and others, will be able to, get this process and get the, if you will, supply chain of vaccines functioning in a way that delivers what has been promised by our federal government. It's an enormous opportunity for Joe Biden to show that government can work and should work for the American people. So I think there's a lot better effort needs to happen, and I have a lot of confidence in the team that President-elect Biden has put together.
Depending on how today and tomorrow shake out in Georgia, it looks like President-elect Biden will be inheriting the most closely divided Congress in at least a generation, maybe longer. And of course, later today, some 100 House members and a dozen or more senators are going to object to some of the Electoral College certifications that have come in from the states. Biden is known as a bridge builder, but this looks like a very long bridge he has to build. How do you do that? What do you think his first steps in that department are going to be?
Well, let me begin by saying I have the utmost confidence that Joe Biden is a bridge builder and that he will use every tool in his toolkit to create, to bring the America together and to work with Congress. And he understands that he was elected by a country that has been very divided. and he understands, he and the team, the task ahead of them. I think the way they will address this is to work to find common ground. And I think there is common ground in terms of the need, as I said, for more stimulus. I think there is common ground for the need for infrastructure spending. I predict, and I don't know because I'm not in the leadership position, but I predict that President-elect Biden and his team will first focus on places of common desire so that they can prove that Congress can work with the White House. And, look, he's a schooled hand at working with Congress. He's done it both as a senator and then as vice president. He was always the go-to guy for the Obama administration when it came to working with Congress. So I just think this is a natural endeavor for him. I'm not saying it's easy. That would be silly to say. But the political theater that's going on around his election, I think, is irresponsible and self-interested. But I really applaud President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris for taking the high road, for looking on and caring about the future of the country and not engaging in the political theater that I think will go on in Congress over the next couple of days.
Secretary Pritzker, the divide isn't just among Republicans. There are tensions inside the Democratic Party between its centrist wing and its progressive wing. I'm thinking that the Biden Department of Bridge Building is going to be very busy.
Well, look, the country we have a big spectrum of people and beliefs, and as represented in the House and in the Senate and in both parties. That's to be expected. And so it does mean, look, a democracy requires really taking into account the breadth of opinions and desires and trying to find a place of common ground. And I think that Venn diagram, there is a significant overlap at this moment. There's a real recognition that the country needs to move forward and address the fundamentals, address the threat of this virus, get America vaccinated, get our economy going. Create relief for working Americans and for small businesses. I think that people understand that regardless of where they fall on the spectrum. And so it's going to be require people coming together to fundamentally address the needs of Americans. And we have Americans who are hurting.
You mentioned climate change. Can you talk a little bit about how Biden plans to address that? He's named a number of different people to positions related to climate. What do you suspect their first or most important steps in 2021 are going to be?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to understand the facts and the reality. And I don't think the current administration, I know, has not been willing to really make sure that everyone's working off of the same set of fundamentals. We have a problem. I know from my time as Secretary of Commerce, part of the Commerce Department is NOAA. We have a significant, over 150 million Americans who are at threat of rising sea levels. This is a real issue that, because of climate change, this is a real issue that has to be addressed and has to be taken seriously. And there's no reason that the United States can't be a leader in addressing the climate crisis facing our planet. We have technologies, we have the will. I see it from the private sector, which is companies are embracing climate sensitive moves and, saying and committing to being carbon neutral. We need our federal government to step up and be right there with us and make sure that the rules and the regulations are uniform across our country and not led just by one state or another state. So there's an enormous opportunity for the Biden administration to play a real leadership role where, frankly, I think over the last several years, the private sector and nonprofits have had to play a leadership role, and places like the state of California have had to play a leadership role because we haven't had that kind of federal leadership. There's also the role in terms of climate globally. If you think about things like our oceans, which I mentioned, that's a global issue that where we need as a country to be working with other countries how to best protect our oceans so that we don't face the kind of potential crises that are threatening our shorelines, if you will, and threatening the well-being of our oceans, let alone our atmosphere. So there's an enormous role to be played, and I think the fact that President-elect Biden has put in place a AAA team led by former Secretary Kerry, led by Gina, led by others who are going to play a role across the administration, I think is a statement about how seriously and how important climate is to this administration. I mean, one of the things that I've been impressed by is of President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris have been really clear about their priorities. They've said there are 4 major priorities for their administration. First is addressing the virus. The second is addressing our economy. The third is addressing climate. And the fourth is addressing racial injustice and equal opportunity. And I think those are 4 pillars that Americans can get excited about and rally around, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on or where you fall in the political spectrum. These are all important issues for every American. And I think being so clear about those as priorities is really going to help set the stage for this administration as they take over in a very challenging time.
You know, you mentioned an additional stimulus possibility a few moments ago. Congress just okayed nearly $900 billion in stimulus. That puts nearly $1 trillion of liquidity into the economy this year. That's no doubt a boost for any incoming president. But you seem to suggest that there might be additional stimulus coming. What makes you relatively optimistic about that?
Well, look, I think that we need, I think that Congress needs to take whatever steps is necessary in order to get our country back on track from an economic standpoint and make sure that Americans are back at work. We still have 10 million plus Americans who are out of work, who were working prior to the pandemic. So, our service economy has really been hit hard, and the good people who work in that industry have been really hurt. And so we need to do our part as a government to make sure that those folks have the opportunity to be back at work and providing for themselves and their families. And we need to help small businesses. The number of small businesses that have been devastated through no fault of their own. The entrepreneurship in small business, the job creation in small business is so important. And so we need to make sure that there's enough help from the federal government to get that part of our economy back in action.
One last question for you, Secretary Pritzker, that kind of takes you back to your role in the campaign. You were a liaison with business leaders, business groups, investing funds, about what sort of role and presidency a Biden administration. I'm curious, what was the main concern from the business community, and what does the president-elect have to do to keep that group on his team? Well,
look, I think the business community really understands that the priorities of the Biden administration are spot on. I think that, what there needs to be good communication, good lines of transparency as to where the agenda is going. I think that, the business community the government sets the conditions for businesses to grow and thrive, and businesses, when they grow and thrive, make investments and hire more people. And we need more jobs in this country. As I said, we have 10 million people who are not employed today, who were employed at the beginning of 2020. And so I think it's really important that that line of communication is cooperative and collaborative, and there's no reason it shouldn't be. and that there are strong lines of communication about the agenda and how it will impact business in a way that is constructive for both business and the American worker. And I think that is possible in a Biden administration.
Thank you, Secretary Pritzker. You've been generous with your time and helpful with your comments. I appreciate you spending time with us today.
Well, Mike, thanks so much, and it's great to see you again.
Same with me. Talk soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We turn now to national defense. Joining us is former Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, who ran the Pentagon, and before that was a United States Senator. Thank you for joining us today, Secretary Hagel.
Yes, sir. Nice to be with you. Thank you.
It's nice to have you. You co-signed an op-ed in the Washington Post earlier this week, just a few days ago, that was joined by the 10 living former defense chiefs, which cautioned against any military involvement in the transition from one administration to another. I just want to quote one key line in which that op-ed said that military officials must, quote, actions that undermine the results of the election or hinder the success of the new team. What made the 10 of you think this op-ed was necessary?
Well, thanks for giving me a couple of minutes. I think we all realized that it was important that we make a statement as a group for this reason, especially the last 30 days, but even before that, there's been a lot of loose, I think, erratic, dangerous talk about using the Insurrection Act, declaring military law, to change the election, to do other things. And President Trump's continued comments and tweets about the election was fraudulent, it needs to be overturned, threats about using the military, as we saw. He did use the military this summer, and it just led us all to seriously review this, because the constitutional responsibilities of our government, of our people, of those in charge who take an oath of office is to the Constitution, not to a president, not to a party. And we wanted to kind of reinforce what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, has said about not misusing the military, and just also let the citizens of this country know that all 10 of us from various backgrounds, political philosophies, work for Democrats, work for Republicans, we all agree on this. So I think when you add all that up, the environment probably dictated it, and we all thought it was the appropriate thing to do.
You know, we talk about the military in great big terms, you know, but it has many pieces, many parts. There are enlisted and enlisted personnel and officers in the ranks, but there are civilians at the top. Was this op-ed aimed at civilians or at people in uniform?
Well, it was aimed at all of our professional military, as well as the appointed officials, the civilians who were in charge of all our agencies of government, and of course, the Pentagon is no different. But it's a reminder, if nothing else, of their sacred responsibilities, the peaceful transition of power. That's the cornerstone of democracy. We've always been able to do that without any issue. 1876 was probably the only other time when we've had a major question. But that dynamic of our democracy is so critical. And also this, we don't want the citizens of this country to lose confidence and trust in our institutions, in our processes, especially our elections. And if we've got a president and others who have been, as they have been doing the last 30 days, saying every day, sometimes 10 times a day, that the election was flawed, it wasn't correct, it wasn't wrong, it was stolen. I mean, it was wrong, it was stolen. Then that has an effect on our democracy and our citizens. Can they trust their institutions? Can they trust their leaders? And if you get to that point in a country, in a democracy, we're in trouble. So I think we wanted to address that overall theme too.
You've undersold it a little bit, Mr. Secretary. You know, it's those 10 former Pentagon, those former Secretaries of Defense, don't get together to do things very often. Can you talk to us a little bit about how this op-ed came about and whose idea it was?
Well, it came about first as they approached me and they approached my 9 other Secretary of Defense colleagues by people who have been in the military, been in different administrations, who've been in the Pentagon, and they came up with the idea. They first wrote a draft, then they went to some of us individually. I think Vice President Cheney was one of the first that they went to, because the people who essentially took the first cut at the draft and idea had worked with him and for him, so they went to him, and he's one of the senior members of this 10-member living
fraternity.
Yeah.
Right. Is there I think most people would want to know, is there a realistic possibility that the military would ever act in this way that you are cautioning against?
I have great confidence and trust in our military leadership, our professionalism of our military. Throughout my life, I've been involved with the military since I was in Vietnam in 1968. And all the jobs I've had, things I've done, I've always been involved with veterans of military. And there is no question that they would not do the right thing. But I think they deserved, especially in the political environment that we have in the country today, that's so polarized, that's led to paralysis. I think they needed some support to do the right thing. Not that they wouldn't or they would question it. I believe they always will, and they would today. But the support that we could give them, 10 former Secretaries of Defense, we thought was important.
Is there a military role potentially in assuring a peaceful transfer of power? Would something like that ever be possible? And would that be considered a defense of the Constitution as opposed to disrupting a transfer? What about assuring one?
Yeah. Well, we've never had that issue, and everybody who has ever served, every former Secretary of Defense, I think every professional military person has said and believes, and it is the case, the military has no role in elections. It should stay out of elections, whether it's enforcing elections or in any way, stay out. We have the appropriate state people. The states and the locales are in charge of elections, not the federal government. And I think that's the way we want it. And are there scenarios when the military might be used to protect the Constitution, bring the Constitution into clear focus and support that Constitution with transition of power? I mean, I don't know, but I don't think so. I mean, we have police, we have other authorities that can do that. I think once you allow the military to be involved in political decisions, and this is a political decision, the transfer of power, because it came about in an election. The people of this country voted, the citizens voted, made their decisions, they elected new leaders, and it was a political decision. That's not the role of the United States military. The role of the military in this country is the defense of this country from outside enemies. And I think we always want to keep it that way.
You are a former Republican senator. Today, 13 of your colleagues, joined by 100 House Republicans, are planning to object to certifying the Electoral College results from the 50 states, some of them anyway. What is your current view of the state of the Republican Party?
Well, I'm a Republican. I am probably a Republican in name only. I don't know what the Republican Party stands for anymore. It's been the Trump party. It's not the party that I joined a long time ago and served in the Senate as a Republican senator. But I think the state of the Republican Party is a mess today. Now it appears that they're going to lose both seats in Georgia. They're going to have to go through an internal review process that's going to be pretty significant. Where do they go from here? does our party stand for? What do we believe? Are we inclusive? It used to be the Republican Party had about 5 major principles. It was a party with a big tent, but you stood for fiscal responsibility, free trade, international engagement, strong national defense and security, and so on. They've lost so much of that today. So they're going to have to go through an internal review process and some significant soul searching to sort it out. And there will be new leaders. President Trump is gone. Already there are probably a half a dozen Republicans in the Senate who say they would like to be the Republican nominee in 2024. You've got an election even before that, an important midterm in 2022. You've got some of President Trump's former cabinet members, current cabinet members, who have said they're interested in being president. So this is going to be a very interesting time for the party, and I think also for the Democratic Party as they work through their issues. But for the Republican Party, they're in a mess today, and it'll take some time to sort out.
You've also noticed, I'm sure, being a former centrist Republican in the Senate, the emergence of a small bloc of senators, Susan Collins of Maine, Mitt Romney, of course, trying to be something of a bridge between the two sides. How hard is it to be in the U.S. centrist Republican in the U.S. Senate today?
Well, in my last few years when I was in the Senate, I could see this coming. I mean, this just didn't start with Trump. I mean, Trump was not the cause of this. He was a consequence, and it was coming back when my last years in the Senate of being this almost absolutist party that you've absolutely got to vote for the party line on every issue. That's not right. I mean, when you're elected, people elect you for many reasons, but one of the reasons they elect you is they have some confidence in your judgment. Your judgment is very, very critical to doing the job. And so I think as we work our way through this, and the Republicans have to look at, and the Democrats too, by the way, I don't think it's a one-party problem here. I think it's both parties. And I saw when I was in the Senate, they're going to have to come together in making this country work again, compromise, work it out. We have strong ideas and positions on both sides. That's okay. That's democracy. But in the end, you put the country first, you compromise, you do things like pass budgets every year. We haven't passed a budget in years. We live on continuing resolutions. When I got to the Senate, budget, you just passed the budget because it was your job. You didn't give yourself a parade for it. We passed appropriations bills. We made the government work. We compromised. But you can't run a democracy based on a one-party absolute system, because if that's where you want to go, then that's basically leads to an authoritarian government. You need both parties contributing, compromising, making it work so that you don't get locked in paralysis of governing this country as we have been in the last couple of years.
Let's take a minute and talk about budgets and the military. For the last 10 years at least, we've spent nearly $800 billion a year on the military. That's a significant increase over the last 30 years. I'm wondering, what do you think the Biden administration will mean for defense budgets and the military posture in general?
Well, what the Biden administration will do, I'm sure, is take a very careful look at the budget, what the budget is now, where it's come from over the last 4 years, and then what's most important, projecting out. What always in deciding a Pentagon budget for your national security, you ask this question first. What does the country need? What do we need to secure this country, the defense of this country? That is where you start. And then you back it down from there. Is it 740 billion? Is it 700 billion, 800 billion? You figure that out. But I think Biden's people will take a careful look at this budget. Is it required? Is it necessary? Where is the money going? Where are the appropriations going? Are they going to the right places for the threats that we foresee, certainly as we plan for the next 5 years and 10 years, because the Pentagon operates on long-term commitments and budgets. That's the way you have to do when you order platforms for the Air Force and the Navy, for new planes, new ships. And so you've got to have forward thinking on this. And I think that's where they'll start. That's where they should start. And I don't know if 740 billion, the current budget now, is the right budget. Is it too small? Is it too large? I doubt if we're going to have a larger budget, but I don't know that. I just add one thing. 5 days after I got to the Pentagon as Secretary of Defense in early February of 2013, sequestration hit. The Pentagon was already taking a $50 billion a year cut as a result of the 2011 budget agreement between President Obama and the Congress. Then sequestration hits. We take another $50 billion that had not been accounted for or planned for. And we were having to take that in addition to the $50 billion that had been accounted for that we planned for. And so it was a pretty rough time, because you can't just bob those budgets up and down, 50 billion cut or $50 billion, $100 billion one way or the other in a short period of time. The planning that goes into every dollar in those budgets is critically important. So that's where I'm sure the Biden administration will start.
And let me ask you one more thing about the job of Defense Secretary. President-elect Biden has nominated Lloyd Austin, a former general. Under federal law, you have to have some space, 7 years, I think it is, between the time you serve in uniform and you take a top civilian job in the military. Do you have a position on? Some Democrats have said they don't want someone so close, such a recent flag officer, to be there on the E-ring. What that, and or can you tell us what kind of signal you think a man like Lloyd Austin sends both to the troop and the nation?
Well, first, Lloyd Austin. I worked very closely with him at the Pentagon, and not a finer officer, professional military than Lloyd Austin. His character, his integrity, his professionalism, everything about him is just first rate. Now, the bigger issue of a recently retired flag officer in charge of the Pentagon, I've never thought that was a good idea. I'm going to support Lloyd Austin because I think we can't play around with this. Biden's got to have a Secretary of Defense. He's made a decision, and unless something comes up in Austin's background that would not allow the committee and the Senate to go forward with him, I don't think that's going to happen. But I'm going to support him. But I don't think generally it's a good idea to do that. I mean, the job of Secretary of Defense is an immense job with immense responsibilities, and it's very much a political job. You don't have to be the smartest person in the Pentagon to know the most about the Pentagon. You'll never be that. It's just too big and complicated. A Secretary of Defense has 950 flag officers to call upon. You've got military professionals that have put their whole lives into this business, 30, 40 years. So you need a Secretary of Defense that's got some ability to navigate the political waters in Washington, which are very rough. I don't have to tell you. And in the Pentagon, they're rough too, because you're navigating in the waters of the Congress. Every member of the House and Senate has an idea about the Defense Department, Armed Services Committees, Appropriations Committees, different parties. You're navigating it within the White House waters. Every president has wanted to take more and more control of the Pentagon. Bob Gates wrote about it. Leon Panetta wrote about it. So you're navigating that. You're navigating within the building, the strength of each of the services that are very significant. The career foreign service, I mean military service in the Defense Department. You're having to make all that work, plus the press, the media. The media is very important here because the media needs to know. The media can't know everything, obviously, but you gotta let the media know a lot. And so when you take just those factors that I've mentioned, that the Secretary of Defense has to deal with all of that, as well as manage the Pentagon and our interests around the world, secure our defenses. I think that outside the flag officer family, that's where our secretaries of defense should come from. But that's just my idea. I'll support Lloyd Austin. He's a good man. I think he'll do a good job.
Would you, if you could give Lloyd Austin one piece of advice as a former Secretary of Defense, what would it be?
Well, I would say you listen carefully, everyone, and peripheral vision. You need peripheral vision. You need to know as much as you can what's going on around you, and what you can know is what's going on behind you. It isn't all just what's in front. Let's take the hill. Yeah, that's important. Accomplish the mission, but you better know what's going on all the way around you, because sharks are swimming around you, and that's not a negative thing. I mean, that's just the business that we're in. But that's be my advice to Lloyd or any future Secretary of Defense.
Thank you for that, Secretary Hagel. That's all the time we have. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, my colleague David Ignatius will speak to Palantir Tech CEO Alexander Karp. His company is involved with many governments, both overseas and here at home, in tracking the COVID and its spread around the world. So please join us for that conversation. Meantime, I'm Michael Duffy, and thank you again for joining us here at Washington Post Live.